Dodge this.
One world currency.
The New World Order.
Those are the roots of trouble.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice, tumbling down the rabbit hole. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. That there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of election, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. But I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people.
And now, welcome to another episode of Down the Rabbit Hole. Here's your host from federaljack.com. It's Popeye.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another live edition of DTRH. That's right, I said I am live again. I've taken a couple weeks off here and there throughout the year, and I took a couple days off last week and earlier in the week this week to work on the house, situate some things. You know, I speak about gardening and stuff like that. I have to actually practice what I preach, and that does take time. So you have to plan on that and, you know, work on the house and do all that stuff. Anyway, it's nice to actually do that stuff. It's refreshing, kind of allows you to unplug from the matrix for a minute and view things almost from just an observer's standpoint while getting other things done. Allows you clarity on so many different levels. Anyway, I don't want to waste any time tonight. My guest tonight is just absolutely amazing. Very intelligent, very well-spoken, very articulate, and hopefully we'll be able to cut through some of the misinformation about geoengineering tonight and get to the nitty-gritty so people actually have a good basis and a good understanding to work from when talking about this. Plus, he's got an awesome website. And like I said, he's just an all-around awesome guy. So I'm not going to waste time reading off of a piece of paper some monologue for you about all his accolades. I'm going to let him do it himself. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, let me introduce to you the one, the only, Mr. Jim Lee. Jim, welcome to the broadcast for the first, but definitely not the last time, my brother.
How do I follow that? I mean, God, man, you just made my day. Thank you, man. Thank you for having me. I'm Jim Lee, James Lee from Sumter, South Carolina. I am a 38-year-old father of one. You know, I'm married, and I am Batman. In my house, I'm Batman. At night, when the veil comes over, I try to save the world. So my family jokes that I'm Batman, and you know, we do's some work over here. And I had a great conversation with Popeye last night. It was about as long as this radio show is going to be today. So I hope you're sitting down.
Yeah. What did we say that we should have recorded that as like an off-air show?
I know, man. You could do like the antics later on. If anybody hears any screaming in the background, no, we're not murdering anybody. There are children present.
I think anyone that's got kids could completely understand that and will be sympathetic
Well, they're my driving force, so you're gonna have to deal with it. That's why I do what I do, and everybody, whether you got a kid or not, you got to realize that you tread lightly and you leave the world a better place than you started. So that's where this all comes from.
Small price to pay for all the work you've done for us, Jim. So let's hop into it right there. Your website. Take as much time as you want and tell the listeners about Climate Viewer. Because, ladies and gentlemen, Jim's website, like, I've put a lot of work into Federal Jack over the years, so as a webmaster, I can appreciate it. This site is immense. Plus, he's got a whole 3D mapping system, pretty much, that you can look at a ton of different things. Everything from every nuke plant in the world to Gwen Towers, HARP installations, all this stuff. So I'm going to give Jim as much time. Jim, you take as much time as you want. Tell them all about Climate Viewer and everything that's available on this website.
Wow, that would take a whole show. All right, so here's the deal. A long time ago, back in the year 2011, there was this thing called Fukushima. I'm sure you've heard about it on the show a time or two. And, that was my wake-up point. And I got into activism. So I, picked a nickname. This is similar to a lot of people have had this story. And if you've never heard one, here we go. So I picked a nickname and I made a avatar and I had a entity and it was called Resonated. And my logo was an anonymous style Guy Fawkes mask mixed with a samurai helmet. And on the mask itself, I'd put a gas mask. And the idea is, I believe that anonymous are, truth warriors, and the samurai protect people, and we all need a gas mask. So it kind of just summed up where I was coming from. And that lasted for a while. I did about 250 articles on my first blog. It was resonated.net. Most people today don't even know about this stuff. So I did that for a while, and then I got this idea. I said, I've done 200 articles. It's not really amounting to anything, because if somebody meets me today, I'm like, hey, you got to see this thing. And they're like, oh, okay, well, what's your website? Well, I went there. There were so many articles. I read one. And immediately I had this aha moment. I said, wait a minute, this is kind of pointless. I mean, unless you want to fight a SEO war in the Google arena, writing articles repeatedly, eventually you get such a body of work that nobody could ever possibly, read it all. I mean, unless they devoted a small-time job, part-time job to reading your stuff. So, it set me to thinking. I said, well, how can I do this? You know what I mean? I've got all this information now on all of these HARP facilities. How am I going to, put it where it's not a 20-mile article, 20 miles long? And that's when I came up with the Google Earth idea. So I went and, using the Google Earth app, I started making maps and saving them. These KML files, and I just made the nuclear map. It was 440 nuclear facilities. And each one of them, if you go to Google Earth, you can click on it and it brings up a little tiny web page. And on that tiny web page, I went and I found a picture of each facility and I put it in there. And then I put in the name, the date it was created, the date it was connected to the grid, all this information I got from the IAEA. And I was working based off of another guy, Declan Butler's previous work. He had abandoned the project and the file had gotten broken. And that's how the internet works. They break data so nobody else can get to it. But I picked that file up and I just kind of, shined it up, fixed the broken stuff, added the new reactors that hadn't been, that were created since the last time. It was updated and now it's up to date. So that's open source activism, and they call it maptivism. They actually have a term for it now. So it turns out what I was doing back in 2011 at the end of my blog days of anonymous moniker, I realized that for me to be taken seriously, I had to use my real name. It was just a fact of life. And that, B, for me to really be able to show people the full picture of the way I see things, I would have to find a new way to do it. And with this Google Earth, it was working perfectly. I said, all right, we're gonna go and find every NSA facility, every Department of Homeland Security facility, every drone that is flown over America. I got them off of f.org. It had a Freedom of Information Act request that showed every single licensed FAA drone and who did it, sheriff's departments, police departments, military installations, colleges. So I made a map out of that. And at the end of the day, it's just, piling up and piling up. And I said, and I put them all into this big Google Earth file. So you still had to have Google Earth on your computer to view it. And that was a hurdle. And I didn't know how to make web pages. So literally at the end of 2011, I started learning how to write HTML and JavaScript. And over a 6-month period, I got to where I could make something. And I called it Terraforming Inc. And it's terraforminginc.com. You can go see it on the Wayback Machine. But the idea was I was going to make a play on, hi, we're Terraforming Incorporated. We're here to reshape your planet. And do all kinds of, scary commercials that were anti-geoengineering and talking about weather modification, because this had become a particular interest during my mapping. I started mapping these HARP facilities and these NextRads, and people were talking about HARP rings. And, at that time, it was really, really popular. And I was like, well, let's explore that theory. Maybe with my map, I can map all these Doppler radars out and map all these ionospheric heaters out. And hell, let's throw in some missile defense radars. They're 23 million watts. And what I ended up with was this really complex map. And I added live data to it. And this was like NASA, NOAA, the Terra Modus, I've learned all these terms, over the years, but basically these NASA instruments, these satellites in space, they have live feeds on them. And if you go to NASA's GIBS website, the Global Image Browsing System, and you're a programmer, you can access all the same data that the government uses. So I just connected all that into my thing. And then I said, well, I'm going to make an app now. So it's on a website and people can go see all this work that I did over the last 2 years. And, first couple versions of it were a failure, a monumental failure. I've got them all. I'll show them to you. But I just kept beating at it, every night. And I have a friend, his name is Seth, and he's helping me, learn to program at night while I'm playing Batman. And I think it's really just come, into this, it's really getting to an amazing spot where the app works well. We're getting ready to make it so that people can add their own stuff. So you can crowdsource pollution mapping and take it a step further and even sign up people to help correct the problem. So say somebody dumps some chemicals in your local pond, you can put a dot on the map and say, I need people to help me clean this up. And other members of the, Climate Viewer community can go say, I'll be there and we'll help you. And after they do it, those people get cred points for being on Team Planet. So this is my dream, is to create this Aaron Brockovich your damn self app where we can, forget the government, forget them all. We don't need any of them to fix problems. So that's the dream. And the app is a work in progress. I've got problems with it right now, but the app is on climateviewer.net. I should probably say that at this point. But what happened was we were using Google Earth and Google shut us down. In fact, they shut down every single Google Earth website simultaneously due to some security flaw thing called the NP API. We won't get nerdy. But when they did that, they basically, cut my cojones. So I had spent all this time developing this app with Google Earth and putting all these layers in there, and it was gone. It's going to be gone by the end of the year. You can't even get to the old website on like Chrome or Firefox. They all already blocked it. You have to go into the plugin settings and say allow it anyway, which nobody will ever do. So they officially blocked my website. I said, all right, MFers, I'm going to learn how to program my own website, and now it's been 2 years of learning. I found this thing called Cesium, and it's an open source WebGL globe, and I used it. And the new version is like 100 times more powerful than the last one. So you guys better watch out, you NWO corporate fools.
Is that where you got the globe from?
Yeah, it's a company called AGI. They do all the missile tracking and satellite tracking for most of the government organizations, and their Globe is a open source project. And I've been participating with them for about 2 years. Once I finally figured out they were going to get rid of Google Earth, about a year into me doing it, I started harassing them, saying, "Guys, this is coming. They're going to close Google Earth, and you guys better be ready for it." And they weren't. When it finally came down, they just got hit by every Google Earth developer on the planet simultaneously in one spot going, "Hey, we're screwed. Please help us. You're the only other alternative on the planet." And yeah, my app's already working, baby. But yeah, this has been a growing process. When I started, I was not a coder. You know what I mean? I didn't even know how to program. When I look at what I've created now, I go, even I'm going, this is fun. This is, I want to make it a video game. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Learning should be fun, and makes it interactive.
You taught yourself all that stuff. It's the same thing like doing radio and video editing and graphic design. I didn't know any of that stuff 8 years ago, and now like it just goes to show you, like, you're a perfect example of what people can accomplish if everyone out there just took a lead from that and said, "Wow, look what Jim did by himself. How about maybe what I could do if I put my mind to it, because I'm pissed off about the same type of things."
Yeah, and I want to further that.
Yeah.
I've got a high school diploma. I do not have a college degree. I do not have formal training. I have an unsatiable curiosity. I am Johnny Five on crack. I mean, I say input all day long. If you give me something nerdy, I'm going to read it because I have to. I'm just curious. So for me, it's just, I guess it's just a natural thing. But for people that aren't curious, I look at them like, why not? I mean, why don't you want to expand your system of beliefs, or think that there's other possibilities, or even entertain the thought of hope? Most people don't really entertain the thought of hope at all. They're just so doom and gloom. And I'm like, you can be addicted to doom. That's fine with me. Everybody's got their kick. But if you can't smile at the end of the day because of your addiction, you might want to quit it.
We talked about that last night off air. We talked about the addiction to fear itself, which we can sidetrack ourselves for a second and talk about, because that's always an important message to speak on. That's how they control everybody. And if we're going to speak about this stuff, we can't buy in and put out the same frequency that the people that are running things, the powers that shouldn't be, do. If we play into that fear, if we put that vibe out, we're not being any better. So if we're going to talk about some of these really horrific things and some scary things like Fukushima, or them using the sky as a science experiment, that could have dire consequences. But we have to be able to have these realistic conversations without that fear vibe. Like, it's scary, but look, let's deal with it like adults. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. Knowing is half the battle.
G.I. Joe.
I'm telling you, man, there were so many good inspirational things in my childhood that have slowly disappeared. And I don't know if it's an intentional demoralization of the most powerful people on the planet, but it's really getting old. So once people learn to see through that hype and understand the differences between control words and when you're being controlled, it's very easy to see who the people in the truther community that don't really get it. And some of them are actually actively participating in fear because they know it sells. Others are actively participating in fear porn because they know that it will get them hits, and they don't really make any money, but they love attention. But at the end of the day, we know that fear, is the number one motivator in almost every decision people make. And it's called fear, uncertainty, and doubt, FUD. And the idea is that if you put enough uncertainty out in the market, you could literally destroy a company. IBM did it. And if you make person fearful that she might be prettier than you and your husband might want to do her, you might buy some makeup. And there's a whole bunch of fear mechanisms for controlling people and getting them to do things. And the other aspect of that is, how do you instill that fear in a person? And it's words. When the government says pay your taxes, you don't pay your taxes because there's a gun in your face. You pay the taxes because there were some words on a paper. It's a threat that, people, are scared of. It's the words themselves, not the action, because the action rarely ever happens. And
That's
only
how
in
police work.
Yeah. That's how bullies work. You're
right?
right.
Usually bullies, what do? They threaten to kick your ass. But
It's a lot of barking.
exactly. It never really comes to fruition.
Yeah,
It's usually more bark than bite.
I'm going to give you a perfect example of that. I just went up to Washington, D.C. to speak at the EPA hearing on jet emissions. And guess what? We talked about chemtrails. So when I went up there, before I got there, there's this jerk, not going to name him, he's not that important, but he threatened to meet me in D.C. So I went there. And guess what? On my Facebook wall, there was this slimy, scary fool who was standing in the bushes outside the EPA building after our hearing. He had taken a picture. I remember exactly what he looked like. I saw exactly when he took the picture. I thought for a second he might be a tourist, but my spidey senses had gone off. Regardless, he did not walk up to me, and I was not scared, and I still went to that hearing. And threats can cause you to, lead in action, and that's not acceptable. That's how the fear, it's a word. The guy threatened to meet me. I guess I should have stayed home. 7 people told me, I'm scared you won't make it there. I'm scared you won't make it back. Don't you know they kill activists whenever they go to these hearings? I was told so many words. But guess what? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me.
Well, there are those people that there are people that I know that are paranoid about, and they live in that fear vibe, and they worry about things like that. Hang on one second, Jim.
You good?
As I'm live, the monster's usually asleep, but something just triggered her to go off. Anyway, now that she totally threw me off, I try not to let the trolls or the bullies or any of that stuff get to me. I try not to let that stuff bother me, because that's a distraction. Stuff like that is put out there by people in order to take you off your game. Like I said to you last night, you got screwed with right after this EPA hearing, after you went and you talked about chemtrails and, well, I don't want to say chemtrails, which, by the way, I bring that up because we're going to get into that later. I want to talk about that with you. Don't let me forget.
It's going to be classic.
But geoengineering is what you really talked about, and you got into it. And you were explaining. I mean, you had explained this in 6.5 minutes at the EPA, which was pretty epic in and of itself. But you had to deal with epic trolling because of this. And I said to you last night, you get the most flack when you're over target. So they're doing that in order to take you off your game. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but we're going to dribble and shoot hoops all day long, baby. I mean, I love seeing trolls dance. I mean, there's this group. I'm not even going to give them enough attention because they've already got enough today. Promise you that. But these groups of angry individuals who lurk and troll, you can pay them some attention. I mean, if you love a great debate, I personally do. I break all the rules. All right, so don't take my advice on what to do with trolls, because I break all the rules. I go and I argue with them, because I personally believe that if they make a point that is actually true, I'm going to change my belief system anyway. It's got to resonate with me. It's got to stick in my belly, and I got to know I was wrong. And you know what? Most of the time, I'll even admit it. And then the trolls will be like, see. And I'm like, dude, it doesn't really affect me what your opinion is. It's just that you actually said something this one time that was true. And even though I hate your guts, it's still true. And that's the way people have to engage with each other. You don't have to have some, oh man, he's a Muslim and I'm a Christian. What could we ever talk about? You're never going to find out, and you're never going to learn a thing. So that's how I approach every situation. And with these trolls, pre-game, I gave them my speech. I hadn't got to the EPA hearing yet, and I put my speech out on my website, and I said, here it is. Debunk it. Dare you. So there's 22 references in the page. They're like, I want to start with reference 11 and 12. I said, baby, I already won. If you got to skip 10 references and you got to go to number 11, I've already won. But continue, please.
Yeah, that's why their whole goal is to take you off target. And like I said, whatever you said at the EPA in 8 minutes or less must have pissed somebody off, because it was like sticking poking a hornet's nest with a huge stick. We only got about a minute and a half before we go up into the break. But when we come back, I want you to get into the EPA hearing, because I think that's really powerful that you were able to interject into the mainstream narrative on C-SPAN the word geoengineering.
Oh, we did.
That's powerful.
It's epic.
Yes, it's important to get that into the conversation because they won't even admit that it's real. So that's part of the issue. You need to get people to be able to talk about it and have an open conversation about it. And you did that. You were able to testify at the EPA hearing.
There are going to be so many people who have never even heard the word geoengineering in their entire life that are going to see that and go, what is that? And it's going to open their eyes like that red pill baby.
I'm excited, dude. I saw the testimony. I thought it was well done. I thought you did a good job. You didn't come across nutty. You came across very professional. You came across very believable to somebody. Like if I was going to look at it with my skeptics hat on and say, "Oh, these people are crazy," blah blah blah. The only way you can be attacked is if somebody attacks you using logical fallacies. And if someone attacks you using logical fallacies, as I've said a bazillion times on this radio broadcast, that means they do not have a real argument. So if someone's attacking you and someone's going off and they're just calling you names and saying, who's this person, or they're stupid, or they're sharing stupid memes on social media, well, then they really don't have a valid argument. People should look beyond that. Don't even engage that argument because that's what it's for. It's to confuse you. Look beyond that and look at what Jim and other people are actually talking about with scientific fact. And then you'll go, oh, wow, they are actually doing this. So, yeah, it's really important that you actually got to speak in front of the EPA and get the word geoengineering out repeatedly, as did others. So, Jim, hold that thought right there because the break is sneaking up on us.
Can I say one thing real quick? climateviewer.com/EPA. Go there now, read it, and any of you debunkers want to call in, I'm right here, baby.
If you have an email, we can throw that out on the other side to them if you want, and Twitter and Facebook and all that, and YouTube too. So hold that thought right there, Jim. Stay tuned,
Roger.
Ladies and gentlemen. 3 short minutes. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. So we should have less background noise now because I've thrown every animal in the house out of the studio. And Jim said he's got his kids out of the background. His wife took the kids out of the background. So we've removed all of our background noise. It's good to know that we're actually humans and we're not robots and we're real people just like you. So I don't mind that kind of stuff. It doesn't really bother me as much as it used to when I used to do radio back in the day when I first got into this, because I realized it shows we're human just like you, ladies and gentlemen. We're the same people. I'm not better than you, and neither is Jim. We're like your next door neighbors coming, and we're all having a big sit down, except our neighborhood's the entire planet. And
there you go.
There are things that we have to have, super important conversations about: Fukushima, geoengineering, all of this stuff. I mean, we have to have these conversations. This is important for our neighborhood watch, so to speak. So
there you go,
Jim. I want to get into what you did at the EPA because, as I said last segment, it's really to me it's epic that you were able to get the term geoengineering injected into the record of this EPA hearing. I mean, that's important because now it's on record, it's on file, it's been carried live on C-SPAN, which you can get into your whole experience. So you went to the EPA to testify. Pick up wherever you want. Explain what you went through, what the experience was like, and what you got to say.
Okay, so let's start at something that is very important and then work our way back. So the most important point I want to make to you about chemtrails, contrails, and geoengineering. These are all argumentative terms. Very, very argumentative terms. They mean different things to different people. Some people think chemtrails mean they're going to kill everybody on the planet. Some people think chemtrails means they're going to cool the planet. Some people think they're, mind control. Now, I'm not in the mind control or kill the planet group. Let's go ahead and get that out there. Number 2, when you're talking about geoengineering a planet with chemtrails, here is how the real world it works, because I have a paper and it's in my speech that I gave to the hearing. They're going to use biofuels. Biofuels are greenwashing. They are the fossil fuel industry pretending to be green. They're growing algae, chicken fat, camelina plant, these HEFA fuels, trash to jet, So they take landfill trash and turn it into jet fuel. And of course, they do use coal. So quit talking about coal ash. It's coal oil, also known as fuel oil 1, also known as kerosene, also in JP8 and Jet A. That's the main ingredient in the fuel. So when you're talking about these are all pretty dirty chemicals, and they're trying to green it up and call it biofuels because George Bush had this thing called the Energy Independence Act of 2007, which requires it. So the Halliburton boys get to green their industry, and they all get to make a whole bunch of green gas for the jets. Now, they want to use these green jet gas near the ground, and in a second tank in the plane at altitude, add sulfur to the fuel. This sulfur will remove the carbon black from the plumes, which will turn these clouds that are heating the planet up into cooling clouds. This is also being tested right now by the Access flights, which is done by Dr. Ringsai Halthori, who I've spoken to twice on the phone, from the FAA, Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative, ACRI, ACCRI. These guys are testing a JP8 doped with sulfur for a reason. And the paper is called Aviation Impacts of Sulfur and blah, blah, blah. It's in my speech. But that's what they're saying they're going to do. Near the ground, use low sulfur, and up in the air, use high sulfur. Why? Because it kills people. And they say that they can get out of, killing a whole bunch of people by using low sulfur near the ground. But if they put it up there in the air, that is exactly what David Keith, Edward Teller, Paul Crutzen, Nobel Prize winner, all of these guys have said stratospheric sulfate injection. And if you put sulfur in the gas tank and you burn it in the sky, that is geoengineering solar radiation management. And it's on right now.
Now, you brought this up last night to me, and when we were talking, and I remember I said to you at first, I said, there's this theory that they're putting stuff in the fuel in regular jets, and that's how they're doing it. But I had not seen any evidence any decent evidence to actually back that up. And I said, I don't believe it unless I see enough evidence. And you said to me, I thought the same way too. And then you started telling me what you just said. And it made me think, that would really, if they're actually doing that, that would eliminate the need for quote unquote chemtrail pilots. Because
there's no such thing.
Yeah.
And there is no vast conspiracy there is a vast conspiracy to hide this. Let's be very clear about that. What's going on here? The aviation industry will be flat broke if carbon taxes are allowed to be levied on them, because they put out so much CO2. It's only supposed to be like 3% of all anthropogenic, so it's a tiny number. We get it. But CO2 is a racket, and we all know that. So the true problem is that they are denying the effects of these clouds on our atmosphere. And we all know that up to this point, it seems that this insulation factor that they have, where they block outgoing radiation, they trap heat, it seems to be tied very clearly to a 100-year agenda to melt the poles. So when you see Jules Verne, how to tilt the axis of the Earth and melt the poles, and Julian Huxley, let's nuke the Arctic to melt the poles, and then you see let's reroute the Kuroshio current up into the poles to melt the Arctic, and we get to the gas. That's a pretty clear agenda by multiple scientists. Some of them were from UNESCO. You're talking UN scientists saying let's nuke the Arctic. Guess what they did? They did nuke the Arctic. So at the end of the day, they did everything they said they were going to do. And guess what? They're saying our Arctic is melting. So what's going on? That doesn't make sense to me. Why would contrails or ship tracks and these clouds they're making, they're trapping heat, they're heating the planet? Wait, that's like Venus. Venus is covered in sulfuric acid clouds and traps heat, and it'll never ever there'll never be a sunny day on Venus. That's our future. So that's what the lie is all about, is that they just really don't want anybody to know what the effects of these clouds are and what they're doing, people, they get people in these rabbit holes of debating the intent or the method. Like, is it sprayed or is it in the gas? Bro, it don't even matter anymore. We can do you can go test it now. And there's a guy, George, I can't think of his name right now. It's on my Escobar, I think. Oh, goodness. Anyway, it's on climateviewer.com, and it's like stratospheric sulfuric acid is today what David Keith suggested for geoengineering by 2050. So he did like the math, and he's like, bro, there's already enough sulfur up there. It's more than what David Keith was saying he wanted in the future. So is it already going on? It's pretty clear. But it's a if it was an intentional geoengineering experiment up to this point, it's a failure because it's heating the planet. Guess what? They say they want to melt the poles. Here's a hook, line, and sinker. There's a group called the Arctic Methane Emergency Group. It's at ameg.me. They say that the whole world's going to blow up just like the dinosaurs did. The dinosaurs, they farted. Lots of farts. Those dinosaur farts and the methane and the CO2 in them, they heated up the planet enough for methane hydrates, these ice crystals underneath the ocean, that suddenly they vaporized and they were rapidly released into the atmosphere. It was this release of methane that killed the dinosaurs, according to this AMEG story. And they learned this from an ice column that they dug out of the Arctic. They're like, look, there's a whole bunch of methane here. It must have been dinosaur farts and ice crystals. So, based on this alarming evidence of methane being released in the atmosphere, they wrote a letter to world leaders saying we need to geoengineer right now. This was in 2013. And that's their stance to this day. And John Neeson and those guys over there, they're kind of crazy. When I told Ken Caldera about it, I was like, Ken, do you know that on the AMEG site, they're talking about using HARP to turn atmospheric methane into diamond dust in a program called Project Lucy? Do you get it, man? That's Lucy in the sky with diamonds. That is freaking nuts, man. And Ken Caldera went to the AMEG site and said, John Neeson, get my name off your website now. And it was on. So I've been razzing these geoengineers for 2 years now because they're funny. And I like to see them dance. But this Project Lucy stuff is not funny. I mean, they're talking about taking 3 radar beams from ionospheric heaters at HARP, Sura, Puerto Rico. It's called the Enhanced High Frequency Array at
over at Arecibo.
Yeah, in the Arecibo, they built a HARP in the bowl at the bottom.
Yeah, in it's like in a crater. They built a dish right in the
one from the
that Charlie Sheen
007 movie.
that Charlie Sheen movie, I think, when they
so many of them
movies there too.
And then there's also one down at Jicamarca, Peru. It's actually a super darn, but it's more powerful than any of the other heaters. So it's Jicamarca, Peru, and then there's the Sura facility in Tromsø, Norway. These are the 5 they mentioned. What they didn't mention is there's also the AMISR up at Resolute Bay and the PFISR at Poker Flat Bay. And both of those are like baby harps, but regardless, they're talking about taking 3 of these beams and pointing them at the same spot. Anybody watch Ghostbusters? Don't cross the streams, bro. Don't cross. Anyway, that's a joke.
I know. Well, these are the same. This is the same mentality, dude. You got to remember, back when they lit off the first atomic test. Well, okay, the first atomic test here in the United States, because that's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
About who built the bomb first, but when they were doing the Trinity test, like more than half the people involved thought they were either going to ignite all of the oxygen in the atmosphere on fire and kill everyone, or split the Earth in half. And they were like, "Yeah, screw it, hit the red button, ding." So,
well, it'd be a shame to spend all this time in science into building this thing and not press the button. It's like, where are you guys from? And yeah, that's what they've been doing to this day.
That's the scary part. We remember when we were kids, because you're the same age I am. Remember when we were kids, we used to watch these horrible movies on like USA Up All Night with Rhonda Shear. They were like B-rated, Z-rated movies. They were so horrible. And it was always some like whacked out mad scientist trying to like blow the Earth up using this type of stuff.
So real. It's so real.
Now it's not on USA Up All Night with Rhonda Shear. It's on C-SPAN.
Yeah. So anyway, before we get too far off the subject, I'm going to go back to AMAG because this is important. These AMAG guys, they have this thing called Project Lucy, and it's 3 beams. They're 13.56 megahertz, and if you point them at atmospheric methane, they believe they can compress the methane down into a diamond, and that diamond will stay in the atmosphere, and those diamonds will form something called noctilucent clouds. These are normally formed by meteors, but in this case, John Neeson, Malcolm P. Light, I believe, is the author. He came up with the idea. He said, and this is supported by AMEG, we'll make these noctilucent clouds out of methane, and this diamond dust is called Project Lucy. It's Lucy in the sky with diamonds. It is geoengineering solar radiation management with HARP. I've been saying that story for 2 years now. Well, I just got confirmation. I haven't had time to sit down to make the video yet, but I've got a copy of David Keith at the SRM 2015 conference. And he said something very interesting. Proposed methods for doing solar radiation management include aluminum, sulfur, and diamonds. And I just fell out of my seat. Am I the only person that knows this story? Because what he just said is amazing.
Yeah, but why? It's just insane that they actually want to try this. And what happens if they actually do make it? What is it going to rain diamonds then? And then everybody below is just you don't think people be running around with bags, huge garbage, trying to collect?
I mean, it would be a pretty cool, sprinkling on your front porch. You know what I mean? But I don't think it's going to work like that. I mean,
dude, I foresee something bad happening.
Yeah,
more than anything than raining diamond. These people.
That's all I can think. And every time I hear this thing revisit, when I heard David Keith said it, I said, "Oh my God, that was serious." You know what I mean? I thought you guys were joking. I thought you were punking me. I read all the papers, and you looked pretty serious. But here's where it gets weirder. AMEG also has another proposal, and it's called the Angels proposal. Now, I'm not going to go with the Angels played his harp. It's too close. We just said anyway. Angels proposal stands for Arctic Natural Gas Extraction, Liquefaction, and Sales. And basically it goes like this. Methane is going to kill us, just like the dinosaur farts. We should go relieve the pressure from the abscess. We will go to the Arctic and drill into these methane reserves and suck it out before it enters the atmosphere. That'll save us from climate change. Win-win.
Bechtel?
Yes. So the point is...
You know where I'm going with.
Yeah, exactly. So these prickholes are up there saying that methane's going to kill us, talking about using HARP to turn it into diamond dust, and conveniently, they have an Angels proposal, the Arctic Natural Gas Extraction, Liquefaction, and Sale. Extraction means pull it out. Liquefaction means turn it into a liquid. Sales, I think you know where we're going with this. These guys are talking about going up and drilling the Arctic. So let me get this straight. Chemtrails are everywhere, heating up the planet, melting the dang poles. And the guys that are saying to save the poles from the methane want to drill the poles.
For the
that
methane.
Is convenient.
For the methane.
And if you go to the HARP report on YouTube and you click on his About page, the only link there is AMEG, the Arctic Methane Emergency Group. And that is not a coincidence. But I'm going to leave that out of there. But anyway, people should see these things because when you see what the agenda is to get to the oil into the Arctic. Right now, if you go to any search engine, because you're critical thinkers, I think this is an educated crowd based on a man here, go to a search engine of your choice and type in Cold War Arctic oil. And you're going to see that Russia, China, and America, I think Japan's even getting in on this, have warships and jet fighters racing over each other's warships, kind of threatening each other over Arctic oil right now, this second. So this is not a conspiracy, bub. That's the clear agenda. It is the mountains of evidence prove it beyond a shadow of a doubt.
Ask yourself why the Coast Guard does patrols up there. Because the reason they do it is to keep an American presence in the Arctic. And that goes back to when I was a coastie going back 12 years ago, before all of this blatantly obvious stuff that's going on now. You know what? One of the things I think they're purposely doing, I think they're purposely, if they're, everything like you said with the fuel, now they don't have to have chemtrail pilots, like we talked about earlier. I think they're doing this on, like, behind the scenes. If you narrowed it down to the very tippy top, I think they know they're going to warm the planet. They want to do it for a multitude of reasons. They can scare the crap out of everybody and push their, give Al Gore money, and that'll stop global warming and man bear pig.
Yeah.
And it also helps melt the ice caps, which makes them getting to that oil and anything else, the methane reserves and anything else underneath there, much easier. Win-win for them. They do things for more than one reason.
Exactly. And if nothing else, you got to look at it like this. There are guys on the planet, they are scientists, they're at universities, and they want to cool the planet. It's clear. They think that we're going to die from it, and it seems like all their proposals are trying to save us from that. So you got to believe that at least some of these people truly believe that. And I'll give them credit, because even though their schemes are wacky, I think their heart is in the right place. But when we see that it's clear that every time a paper comes out and says that one contrail did more heating, 5,000 times more heating than the entire civil aviation fleet's estimate, and then the other report says that contrails may be trapping more heat than all the CO2 since the beginning of aviation, when those kinds of studies come out and then they're immediately rounded down immediately, you can see that not only are the people who are speaking up about it in the scientific world, they're being shunned. You think we get trolled when we talk about stuff? Even the scientists get trolled. Even the scientists. So these guys are trying to raise the alarm and say, look, we don't know anything about aviation-induced cloudiness. We don't really know the effects of it. And if you go and you look at the dust ice effects on the ECHAM 5, you'll see that aerosol cloud interaction remains the largest uncertainty in climate science. So all these IPCC models, all these future projections of what geoengineering SRM might look like, they are fundamentally flawed because they do not account for aerosols at all. They do not understand their mixing. They don't understand their chemical transports. They don't understand when they go up, when they go down, what they do, why they do it. So how in the hell could they predict anything past next week globally when my weather guy screws up what 3 days from now is going to look like? And I understand we're rounding and we're averaging. Every estimate that I've looked at in my studies over the last 2 years on the subject of jet emissions and how they turn into clouds, it seems to me that every single one of those papers, they say, we're referencing the 2000 data, which was an estimate, and we're rounding it up because of fuel expansion. So basically they do this. Some guy back then said this much crap was coming out of the planes, and because X more billion gallons of fuel was burned in the last 10 years, we're just going to do a little math, and that'll tell us how much is coming out today.
But if the base figure is skewed.
Exactly. So you got to understand that every bit of this data that they rely on, it's just completely made up. I mean, it's just the biggest, I'm going to scratch my head. We really haven't ever done any tests. We haven't, they got this thing called the ARM.gov, I think it is, Atmospheric Radiation Monitoring Service. It's on my map at climateviewer.net.
Jim, plug yourself really quick, because the listeners in the chat want all your websites, and just plug anything you want. If you have email, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, anything, go.
Yeah, if you go to just about any social media and you type in REZN8D, Robert Edward Zebra November 8 Delta, that's me, Resonated. Jim Lee on YouTube, you can just type it in. There's the artist and there's me. If you click on channels, my username on there is R3ZN8D. Other than that, you go to climateviewer.com/resonated. All my stuff is there. So in reality, I made climateviewer.com, every bit of it. I have 4 team members, whom I love dearly. We're like a family, and we've been together for about 1.5 years now. When I finally created this most recent version of my website, it's a WordPress. I added new members to my team planet, I call it. And, at the top, you'll see research. There's 6 pages there. I wrote them myself. They're like a summation of everything I know about those 6 topics, which I care about, and I'm constantly refining them. And the idea is that at some point there's a heart page there, there's a geoengineering page, there's a New World Order surveillance map for where you can see the Oz-Kan-Zuckus Five Eyes and the Stone Ghost Network. Love to say that. Stone Ghost Network. Stone Ghost Network. That just powers 3s, baby. Everybody should look that up. So, and then the nuclear reactor stuff, and on that page I highlight the work of Rad Chick, who's my girl, who apparently is frequenting this show now. So you guys should be familiar with Rad Chick. She's hosted on climateviewer.com. I made her homepage. So for each of my members that came onto the site, I made them a homepage also. And on her page, you can see her Twitter, her latest YouTube video. It's automatically embedded, links to all of her social media and all of her articles on our site. And that was kind of the idea, to bring people together, give them, I created the vehicle, use it. It's there. I'm not making any money off this, but here you go. Let's do this thing. And if we, come together, there's power in numbers. So at the top of the website, research, and then there's maps. Those are links to my app, which will, get you over to climateviewer.net and turn on certain layers. So it's like pre-configured. And when you go to climateviewer.net and you're using ClimateViewer 3D, you can turn on a layer. And then down at the bottom, there's a share link. And if you click that, it will share just the layers you have on. So if you want to show somebody just the fracking map, you can show them the fracking map. And that's the idea. So I built all this to make it rapidly shareable. And then I also did 3 timelines. One's on chemtrails and contrails and climate change. The other one's on weather control. So it goes from 1850 to present. And I'm going to brag right now because I want to. My geoengineering timeline was so accurate that Phil Burns, Will Burns, one or the other, I believe it's Will Burns over at the Washington, D.C. Geoengineering Consortium stole it. I went on Ken Caldeira's Geoengineering Forum, and I saw this guy posting this history of, climate engineering on Dippity.com, and I went and I looked at it, and I was like, bro, he stole my whole timeline, inserted like 4 references, and even used my pictures. It did not reference me at all. So the bottom line is, imitation is flattery, and I just had a PhD from the DC Washington Geoengineering Consortium copy paste my timeline. It's that accurate.
Well, you must be doing something right. And like I said to you earlier, and I said to you off air last night when we were talking, and we were going over everything, and I said, if you're getting that much flack, just like the old World War II bomber pilots say, you catch the most flack when you're right over the target. So you must have, really pissed someone off. You must have touched a nerve, so to speak. And we're going to get into the EPA stuff and more on the other side. I want to talk about the mechanics of geoengineering a little bit. And we can talk about chemtrails a little bit, because I know that's one of which we did already, but I want Jim to elaborate just a little bit.
Oh, we will.
And ladies and gentlemen, I urge you to go check his work out. Trust me, his website is absolutely amazing. I don't give endorsements unless I wholeheartedly believe them. Jim's the man. I support him. You should too. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We will be right back for a short minute. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back with hour number 2 here on tonight's live edition of Down the Rabbit Hole. I am your host, Popeye from FederalJack.com. It is August 13th, 2015. Tonight's guest, Jim Lee. Amazing website. You have to go check it out. Jim, plug your stuff one more time shamelessly. YouTube, everything. Facebook, Twitter, website.
I'm at climateviewer.com, and my app is at climateviewer.net. It is ClimateViewer 3D. You're going to really love that. My YouTube is Jim Lee. If you just type that into search engine and then click on channels, there's the artist and then myself. I'm an artist too, whatevs. And my Twitter, my Facebook is Resonated, REZN8D. Robert Edward Zebra, November 8 Delta. So
check out his map. I really urge you to go check out his maps. go check out. And one of the things I want you guys to look up, actually, while we're talking, if you guys could, it's climateviewer.net, and go bring up the map. And then, Jim, what is it, profiles? Or when you to bring up all the HARP facilities like Arecibo?
Oh, once you get there, if you there's going to be a pop up, and you can either hit open the layers from there. If you click the other button and the layers menu is not open, click on the layers button. It's in the top right. When you do that, there's going to be a menu, and it's going to show all of the contents of the website. And you click on places, and when you click on places, there's a drop down. It'll say like nuclear, Big Brother, and then electromagnetic. If you click on electromagnetic, you're going to see Star Wars Defense Initiative missile defense radars, ionospheric heaters worldwide, ELF, VLF facilities. The list goes on. And each one of these, I went and found all those points. It's like I'm kind of almost embarrassed to say it sometimes, because people are like, dude, when I've got a couple of friends that finally figured out I did all this stuff myself, and they're like, bro, you nerd hard, because I would do this like all night long relentlessly, because it's ironic. I won't get into that, but anyway, I'm interested in the hunt, you know what I mean, for knowledge, and at some point it became a video game. You know what I mean? Like, there's this ionospheric heater. It's called Sura, and there's no satellite data. It's all blurred out, and you still got to find it. And you don't want to be accurate, and you're finding like local photos on Picasa, and triangulating based on all this stuff. And in that case, I had put the dot where I thought it was, and I swear to God, 2 years later, when they got a satellite of it, my dot was in the center of Sura.
Well, nice.
I was so proud, man. I mean,
Nice.
I have a million little victories like that I could tell, but I would bore you to tears.
What's the one for? I tell them that I'd like to have them turn on like the HARP facilities, like the one in Arecibo, because what I want to talk about for a second is
the easy way to do that is to go to climateviewer.com, and on the top, on the menu, there's a section called Maps, and you just click on ionospheric heaters and Star Wars.
All right, well, that makes it easier. See, that's why I wanted you to steer them. So the reason I want them to do that is because I want to talk a little bit. We're going to get it, since we're going to. I figure the last half hour I'll let you go off about the EPA thing, because it's a good idea for people to have an understanding of why you went there and you were so passionate about your speech, as the other activists were as well. So I want to talk a little bit about the mechanics of this, because I just had Mike Murphy on, and he's been a frequent guest on the show before, and we've talked about the mechanics of geoengineering a little bit, but I think hearing it coming from you would help explain a little bit better. And I want to talk about the ionospheric heaters a little bit, because this is something that gets, like you mentioned the HARP rings earlier.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion about it.
Yes, confusion would be a nice way to put it, but yes, there's a lot of quote-unquote confusion out there. And some of it purposeful, some of it just because people just don't understand what they're looking at. But I think it's important to break this down in a very easy-to-understand manner. So I want to talk about how they use the high-pressure domes. And you and I have talked about this before. And they can use, like, Arecibo, the HARP installation, the one in Norway. And, in fact, the video I did on the drought, where I showed how they could manipulate and move the jet stream and everything else to cause the drought over in California, I showed a video clip where they actually mentioned all of those facilities. And it was just kind of ironic that you brought it up tonight, and it made me think of this. So I want to talk a little bit about the high-pressure domes and how they can use those to steer storms, plus how they can use it to create vacuums and drag the jet stream and move it around, which has drastic effects on our weather here in the United States. So wherever you want to pick up with that, feel free to nerd out as much as you want, as you say.
Boy, you asked the hardest question first. This is going to really upset a lot of people. So I try to avoid this question as much as possible, because let me start with a preface. The day we all agree is the day we could all be wrong. Shout out to Stone Lee. There's a lot of confusion about what can do what. And this is my personal opinion based on the volume of evidence that has been presented to me up to this point, and is subject to change at any moment given proper documentation that resonates with me and I find it to be true in my soul. I am open to change my opinions at any point. But I don't believe HARP can steer the jet stream. There's no possible way. And here's why. But I'm going to tell you who can steer the sky, so stay tuned. Because this is how conspiracies are born. They're called straw men. Look at the right hand. Don't watch the left hand in your back pocket stealing your wallet. Prestidigitation with words. So, HARP was originally designed to modify the ionosphere, period. And the reason why they would want to modify it is many, very many. Initially, why were ionospheric heaters created? This is an important one. You don't have to take just my word for this. Check out Rosalie Bertel's info on it as well. There's a copy of that on climateviewer.com/HARP, or you can click it on the menu at the top. In 1958, when they were doing the upper atmospheric nuclear explosions, they finally banned them. And the reason why they were blowing it up there to begin with is because the military has a, can I say hard-on? For destroying the ionosphere. They've been trying to destroy it since the 50s for a couple reasons. They hate it. It's unpredictable. It really screws with the radio. And one day a ham operator might get, 10 miles, and another day he's talking to a guy in Asia. So generally speaking, they hate it. They hate how it's unpredictable, and they want it controllable. That's why. That's the main reason, point blank. So beyond that, there's many other things that have been born of this research, which started in 1958. So in 1958, they found out something called the Christophilos effect, like Jesus Christ. Christophilos, Philos. The Christophilos effect was when Starfish Prime exploded in the upper ionosphere. The radiation bounced from pole to pole, riding along the Van Allen belt. As it did this, it destroyed satellites. Ooh. Now we have a weapon, or a potential weapon system, or a potential weapon mitigation system. It's a bug zapper, if you will. If you introduce enough electricity into our magnetic field lines, they radiate, they pulse, they're called Whistler waves. They gather electrons, they scoop from pole to pole. These are called hops. As they hop from pole to pole, they gather more radiation and they rain it out into our atmosphere. This is called artificial air glow or artificial aurora. The reason they're doing it is because in Arecibo back in the 80s, they started using these plumes. Let's back up. 58. In 58, they started to replace the upper atmospheric explosions. They started dumping barium, strontium, and sulfur hexafluoride from rockets and satellites in space. The reason why is because the ionosphere is invisible. And in order to see an invisible medium, you need a tracer. So these chemicals were conveniently tracers. And when they dumped these barium, strontium, and sulfur hexafluoride plumes, some in the hundreds of kilograms, according to quotes, they would heat them up with a microwave so that they could see where the ionosphere is, and maybe the military could predict where to bounce their radar, their over-the-horizon radar, to look for commie submarines. Yeah. And then it got weirder. So then they figured out that extremely low frequency waves can travel to the deepest parts of the ocean. And they were doing it with these two very, very large ELF facilities in Republic, Michigan, and Clam Lake, Wisconsin. These were like 40 and 50 mile long phone cords, like power lines. They were power lines in, like on poles that were 40 and 50 miles long in the heart of America. And they were sending out these really powerful ELF waves. ELF waves are very low frequency in the 30 to 300 megahertz range. And people argue about those. There's many different definitions of what an ELF or VLF actually is. I found this out at the end of the day, so don't argue with me, but you know what I mean. So basically, we're talking about very low frequency, we can hear from 20 to 20,000 hertz. These are not audible tones, but just to give you an idea, we're talking from 0 to 30 into the 300 hertz, those are the signals that can influence your bodily activity. Nerves can, that electricity can be absorbed into your nerves. Electricity produces hormones. Hormones affect mood, affect health, affect everything. And your antennas are your nervous system. They send and receive electricity every day, well documented. So this ambient EMR, this electrosmog, this, outside artificial electricity that's being bombarded on us, that can influence brain, function and sleep patterns and anything from passivity to outrage, according to military quotes, and could be used in conjunction with mass media broadcasts. Whatever the heck that means, that's scary. So when I'm reading these quotes, and I'm reading the Russian Duma saying the U.S. has built a mind control weapon that can control the populace's brainwaves, and they're talking about HAARP, that's a very scary statement as well. So when you put it all together, can it tell Bob to go out and kill somebody? No. But these ELF waves that they now figured out they could make with HAARP. Let me back up. The two ELF wave generators they had in the heart of America at Republic, Michigan, and Clam Lake, Wisconsin, they were having this effect on the local populace, and it was called the hum. Have you ever heard of it? The Taos hum, Taos, hum.
Yep.
Well, there were numerous studies, on this, and there were activists that were literally breaking into the government facility and cutting the wires. Bet you never heard that.
No, that's that, but it doesn't surprise me that somebody took it into their own hands. And they did use HAARP, by the way, for what you're saying that they could do with it. They did it in the first Gulf War. That's why in the first Gulf War, as opposed to the second Gulf War, the Iraqis just gave up really easily.
I said the same thing, man. We didn't talk about that last night, but I said the same thing to Packy and a dozen other friends of mine that, when I saw them come out, I believe they used a combination of electromagnetic weapons and something called calmatives. You ever heard of a calmative?
No. What, like chemical-wise?
Yeah, it's the real chemtrail, the one that nobody's allowed to actually talk about. Chemtrails are biological weapons sprayed from aerial planes. They have these things called the gay bomb.
Oh, I heard. Yeah, well, yeah.
Google that, and you're going to have your eyes open because it's real. And they have other ones where they can use a calmative that they spray over a crowd, quote, to stop riot conditions. It's all under the Joint Non-Lethal Warfare Division. So all of this stuff coming forward, directed energy, ELF weapons that screw with your brain. By the way, Russians said they had a zombie apocalypse weapon capable of scrambling your brain. So this is real. All of these electromagnetic and chemical weapons fall under what's called non-lethal weaponry. And it's this new, I don't know what the heck you would classify it as, but all of them fall under that umbrella. And it's called like the more sane war or something like that. It's like, we can do war and not have to kill everybody, but I don't understand the motivation behind it. But a lot of it seems to be geared towards what you would do in a homeland security kind of setting. They have a calmative, chemtrail spray where they can put an invisible dye over an entire crowd, and then when they go home, still go take a light and flash it over. You were at that scene. Come with us. I mean, this is scary martial law, chemical weapon fry your brain stuff. But yes, they were doing that in the middle of the heart of America, and they said that it wasn't really affecting people. Oh, it was affecting birth rates of birds and all kinds of stuff in local biota. But the hum that everybody heard in their ear from the 3 million watt signal, wasn't us. So allegedly they closed it down. I'm going to be honest with you, out of all my research, I never got a final answer on whether it's closed or not. I mean, because it kind of looked like it was definitely closed. They had a congressional hearing on the thing, and then suddenly there was discussion of it may close. I don't know, but it's sold.
From what I understand, they sold HAARP. They sold it to like a private contract.
Oh no! I'm still talking about the two in Michigan and Wisconsin. HAARP's next. So HAARP, they figured out they could do the same thing. So that was my belief why they probably did actually shut that down. But in fact, what I found out was Cutler, Maine, they've got a VLF facility there. it's doing the job. So in downtown Maine, there's a big ELF, VLF facility, pumping 2 million watts of radio bands right through your brain hole.
They could still use those two facilities, though, right?
Yeah, they probably do. And I mean, in case of emergency, I'm sure they'd turn it right back on. But now that they have HARP, they've got all kinds of new ways that they could do it. And one of them is called polar electrojet heating. And this is fascinating because a lot of us have heard about these earth groans or sky trumpets. But basically they're electric sounds. I mean, I'm a audio nut, and I've listened to so many of them, and I said they all sound like electricity to me. And then when I came across this, I said this has got to be the causal factor in these things.
Like the vibrational hum that electricity gives off?
Yeah, it's what it sounds like, and sometimes it's like a flicker, and sometimes it's like a whale under the ocean is what it sounds like, or a train passing at a distance. But regardless, this polar electrojet heating, basically HARP in Gakona, Alaska, there's only one HARP, let's be clear. It's the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program up at Gakona, Alaska. This sucker's got 180 antennas. They're 72 feet tall, each of them. And it puts out 3.6 million watts of electricity go into the antennas. And when it's all added up, what comes out, the effective radiative power, is 5 gigawatts. For those who don't know what a giga or a gigawatt is, think about Back to the Future and what Doc Brown said. 1.21 gigawatts. 1.21 gigawatts. That was a lightning bolt. That was a lightning bolt, bro. So I'm having my aha moment. I'm going, this thing's a freaking lightning bolt generator. That's pretty awesome.
How many lightning bolts would it, like, that would probably be like, what, 6, 7 lightning bolts?
Well, they have a thing called a super bolt, I found out. And a super bolt's actually in the 100 gigawatt range. So let's be real. The super bolts are still the king, but HARP's getting pretty darn close. So this 100 gigawatt brought up an interesting point. Bernard Eastland, John, who was from the HARP patent guy, he didn't actually make the actual HARP patent, but he very heavily influenced it from ARCO and Bernard Eastland Science. He said it would take 100 gigawatts to steer the jet stream or to steer a tornado. So that's what we were originally talking about. What would it take to do it? It was 100 gigawatts. His math, and John Herscher, who's the current guy who runs HARP, says we need 100 gigawatts to do it. Well, here's the fascinating part. The Tromsø heater, which is over in Norway, Tromsø, Norway, it's currently 1.21 gigawatts. 1.21 gig. Anyway, we'll get into it. It's just a coincidence, but anyway. Even more coincidental, they're now upgrading it to something called IceCat 3D, which is, wait for it, 100 gigawatt.
And go back for a second, because you said something that I don't think people caught. At first, we were talking about just steering hurricanes, which is a big thing and they can do. But what about, Jim, you just said steering tornadoes.
Yeah,
I think people realize that that's actually a real capability. Now, think about, as we talk about this, ladies and gentlemen, think about those massive tornadoes that ripped through the heartland a few years ago, right? Think, what if some of those things were them, the powers that shouldn't be, whoever the people are that have their fingers on these buttons, right? What if that was them playing with this stuff and testing it and seeing what they can do? Because Lord knows they actually do test things in real time on the general public. Let's just be clear. I think everybody here is to the point where we all accept that that's an actual fact. It's an unfortunate fact, but it's an actual fact that they actually use us like we're in an ongoing science experiment. So just think about that for a second. Now go back to what you were saying, Jim. They could steer, again, a tornado. That's incredible.
Yeah. You can go to my YouTube channel, and on it, about 2 years ago, well, yeah, probably about 2 years ago, you have to scroll back out about 100 videos on there. You can see a presentation that was given at the Weather Modification Conference in 2008. Now, some of you might be scratching your head, you never heard this before, but you really don't have to go to any popular YouTube stars to find out about weather modification. You can go to their own conference on the AMS Convex website. So this American Meteorological Society, every year they have a Planned and Inadvertent Weather Modification Conference, which is hosted by the Weather Modification Association of America, usually in like Arizona or California. So at the 2008 conference, and I've read almost every one of these papers, so y'all way behind me, don't come at me with that crap. But most of those papers, they also came with a recorded presentation. And like back in the day, the early ones, they were in some funky format, and I had to go and convert them. They wouldn't just go onto YouTube, so it was a very labor-intensive process. This was one of those videos. And I converted it, and it was Lyle Jenkins. I'm thinking that's his name. This is all from my memory. Lyle Jenkins, and he was giving a presentation on behalf of the late Bernard Eastland. Bernard Eastland was supposed to show up at the Weather Modification Conference to give a talk about steering hurricanes and tornadoes with HARP and solar-powered satellites, and he died before he made it there.
I'm sure that's a coincidence.
It's the videos there. You can look at the history on this. This is freaking as real as it gets. So he was supposed to go there and have his talk, and you can hear the guy, he says at the very beginning, unfortunately he couldn't make it. I was a friend of him and a colleague of his. I'm going to try my best to give his presentation as he would have wanted it. And you can go to the Wayback Machine and look at eastlandscience.com and flip through it, and all of this stuff jives with what was said in the video. And at the end of the day, he's saying 100 gigawatts is the magic number for steering tornadoes. So currently, there's nothing on the planet with that power. That's just a fact. The only thing
they teamed up, like, what if they put like HARP and
exactly crossing the streams like Project Lucy? That's when you got to start considering the possibilities that when you go Ghostbusters on the weather, and you cross the streams, baby, some weird stuff can happen.
What are you gonna say? Never cross the streams. Yeah.
Don't ever go Ghostbusters on the weather. don't do it.
Yeah, not a good idea, dude. Maybe we should follow some of the lessons learned in the movies from the 19th.
Yeah. I'm just having like epiphanies here. But in the end, these things, the HARP facility itself, can it change the weather? Yes. They make dust devils on the pad all the time. You should see them when they turn it on, because it's actually spiraling the signal, the electrons and everything. That it's literally like whipped up little wind dust devils. But that's about the extent of any of the stuff that I've seen from like personal nerds who were up there posting on their phone, and they're like, I'm at HARP right now, we got the thing on, and it's, check it out, it made a dust devil, and they can make air glow directly overhead, so they can make a big bright light in the sky. It's a plasma ball. They made a plasma ball for like an hour and held it in place for and the minute they turn the signal off, it disappears. So at the end of the day, they're just having fun, playing with electricity and mixing plasma balls in the sky and seeing what it does.
Isn't there a basic law of physics that says something like, for every action, there is an equal and opposite
exactly
reaction?
There's an even better one, though. With an increase in heat comes an increase in pressure. And that's where I like to go with it at its most basic function. And when you take 3.6 million watts, you ramp it up to 5 gigawatts, you send it into the air. Now, they said that they listened to that signal down in Nevada, and they were catching the signal from HARP in Nevada. So it's going up into the sky, bouncing off the ionosphere, coming back down, landing in Nevada. The power of that beam was like 0.0001 watts. So for all the stories about the death ray from hell that's going to fry you in your seat, it was very weak when it got there. So what does this tell you really about what HARP's doing? All of that energy, nothing is either created nor destroyed. It is only transferred. And all of that electricity and that power is converted to heat and lost to aerosols in the atmosphere, and it's heating the planet. It is a freaking microwave, bro. It's a microwave, bro.
I think that, like we talked about earlier, and you agreed, I think they're doing it on purpose for a multitude of reasons. Jim, I'm going to pause this right there because the break is sneaking up on us. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I told you, dude, that the 2 hours would fly right by. Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. 3 short minutes. Check out Climate Viewer. You will not be sad that you did. I promise. You'll love that. We are back, ladies and gentlemen. Final segment. Like I said to you, Jim, this show was going to go by uber fast. like
blazing fast.
blazing fast. Okay, so last half hour here. There's a few things I wanna touch on really quick with you, and I'll throw them out to you, and you can pontificate on it. We can talk about the chemtrail thing, and because I know you want to talk about what we talked about last night. You were saying the original, where the idea of the chemtrail conspiracy came from. You want to talk about that a little bit, which goes in hand with what you were talking about them actually having all this crap just in the jet fuel, and then you really don't need
It's a theory.
spraying planes, right? So I mean, I want to get into that, and then I want to cover the EPA thing. But before we get into that, you mentioned something last segment that made the chat room go crazy, and I don't think they know what we were talking about. The gay bomb. Really quick, the Pentagon had this idea that they would drop this bomb on the Iraqi troops back in 91, and they would make them all gay, and then they would be too busy having gay sex to fight the invading soldiers. I'm not kidding. They figured that they would drop this bomb and instantly make them gay, and they would be like overwhelmed with one another and be having sex in their foxholes, and they would be easy to take out and overwhelm. I'm not kidding. I guess they decided to go with using the mind control HARP method because that actually worked to a certain extent. A lot of the troops gave up in the first Gulf War. Kind of makes you wonder why they didn't use it to saturate the field in the second Gulf War. Oh, maybe because they wanted the whole war to last like they did Vietnam so they could make tons of money. Oh, but that's a whole nother sideshow, which I've done about 100 of them. Anyway, so let's get into, now that we covered the gay bomb really quick, and you can go look it up, ladies and gentlemen, for yourself and do further research on it. It's actually real. Yes,
the truth is scarier than fiction.
Dude, for real. Like, these people are insane. So, okay, that's covered. Now, let's do the chemtrail thing, and then let's get into the EPA thing, because I want you to like talk for a few minutes about what it was like to be at that hearing and, have C-SPAN roll in and that whole experience in and of itself. Because I know that was really powerful for you and that meant a lot to you. So I want you to be able to express that to the audience and like what you went through. So before we get into that, the chemtrail thing that we were talking about, go ahead, take a few minutes to do that, and then you can segue into the EPA.
Okay, so like I came at it from a very pragmatic standpoint. I said, if I'm going to try to figure out what's going on with this chemtrail thing, because I've been played before. I got played with Ellen and I believed a whole bunch of crap, and I scared my family. Then I learned about this thing called slave speak, and I learned about high-level, low-level descriptors, and then I learned to, basically disseminate what is tangible and what's not real. And once I could find tangible evidence, it made it easier for me to have a path forward. So in a nutshell, in lay terms, I just wanted to answer the simple question, what in the world are they spraying? So I started with process of elimination. The most obvious, path would be the gas tank for me, because there's chemicals pumped in there and they're sprayed into a turbine and they're burnt and they come out the back. Whatever's not burnt, guess what? It just got sprayed out of a plane. So that's where I come at it from, And the more I looked, the more I realized that for me personally, the conspiracy is that nobody knows this stuff. I mean, that's the real conspiracy, that they don't know what's in the gas. They don't know how it's burnt, what it does, what its effects on the climate are. The bottom line is this. The hearing that I just went to was the first in history for a reason. When you got billions and billions and trillions of dollars wrapped up in the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, as they call it, these guys, they got weight. I mean, even at this hearing, they're saying that they're going to, write a proposal and they're going to wait and see what ICAO does in February, and then they may decide to regulate. So I'm going up there mainly to just be, for the first time in history, somebody to say just what's on the tip of everybody's tongue. Stop making clouds. That is a non-high level descriptor argument. That is a what's the agenda statement. You can't even argue with it. And that's where people get into these logical fallacies like you talk about. They want to get into the debate about the finer points of chemtrail versus contrail when both are high-level descriptors. They don't mean a damn thing unless you believe they mean this. So if you engage in verbal ninjutsu with idiots and trolls, you're never going to get to the truth. You just have to look at the science and then look at the obvious and follow your gut. And what I kept seeing over and over again was People said barium's in the chemtrails. Guess what? I found barium. It comes from a chemical, from a dude who has a company and a name and an address. Yet, that's not on any chemtrail website. That's a conspiracy. So here, let's get that one solved. Octel Corporation, originally designed by DuPont, it's called dinonaphthalene sulfonic acid. The chemical name is called Stadis 450, STADIS 450. This is a anti-static agent. It's put into the gas to keep it from igniting when sparks get near it. Now, that sounds like a noble cause, but it's barium. And it's been in the gas since 1962. And how much of it is coming out of the rear of the gas, the exhaust plume, unburnt, unknown? Guess what? There's no biomagnification studies or any bioaccumulation studies. Why? Because it's a conspiracy, right? Come on, people. You're not that stupid. So anyway, barium's been coming out of the plane since 1962, but it's a conspiracy. Oh, and it was made by DuPont, now Octel. Octel, coincidentally, is the only company left on the planet that still makes lead to put in planes. They're just an extra special company anyway. So you can actually debate, and you can actually go and to the Octel company, and you can protest there, and you can say stop using these poisonous chemicals. But that would mean that something gets done about chemtrails. So that's where I'm at. I'm going to keep saying chemtrails, contrails, aviation-induced cloudiness, aviation cirrus clouds, and artificially induced cirrus, jet-produced contrails, jet-produced clouds, artificial clouds, global dimming. There are 100 terms for the same thing. And it's clouds. These are clouds. They're made by planes. And everybody's arguing about how they're made. Fine. I get along with many of the chemtrail community because I leave open the possibility that I am wrong. But I got all the evidence stacked up on my side, and it's overwhelming. And what I'm saying is, if you just look at what's in the gas and the additives, and you realize that there are no actual proper studies of what the exhaust particulates coming out of these planes are in real world situations. So they do a special study. They say, send me some gas. We're going to test it. They go get their own, NOAA or NASA DC-8. They put the gas in there and they test it. They fly up behind it. They test it. Lab settings is all I'm saying. Those are laboratory settings. Your guy worked on that engine and put that stuff in there and tested it. That is a laboratory setting. It is a fixed game. None of this data is real. So I go to reading all these studies, and it turns out that there's things called FAME contaminations, fatty acid, methyl something, FAME. Then there's humbugs. Humbugs are biological material growing in the gas tank, like E. coli and mold and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, so in the jet fuel tanks.
In the fuel tank. So they talk about, we're getting sprayed with viruses and bacteria. That is a distinct possibility. Otherwise, they wouldn't be putting biocide in there to kill that stuff. Oh, by the way, it eats away at the metal in there. And guess what's coming out everywhere and people are complaining about? Metal. So there's science behind this, brother. It's not crazy. It's science, and nasty companies who only care about their dollars per gallon, and they do not care about the environment. They do not care about your health. They want to fly as cheaply as possible. So that's where I come in. That's my belief. And when I look at it, the more I look at it, it's just disgusting. So, JP,
when you and I talked about this, when you said, you're willing to change your theories on it, you and I talked about this last night, and I said, it's interesting, like looking at it from my perspective, because I said to you, I don't know if I buy into it enough yet because I haven't seen enough evidence. And you said to me, the first thing you said was, I thought the same thing.
Yeah.
It's not like you're coming from a place of like, no, you guys are all a bunch of retards. It's like, hey, I thought the same thing, but a little bit deeper. The more I looked, the more I understood that theory a little better, which is what people need to do. And look, people should look at all of this stuff with an open mind and be willing to let the evidence lead them where it goes. And I'm not saying they don't seed the clouds and they don't manipulate weather. They do, but it's like I've said a bazillion times. I don't like saying, and I said this to you last night, I don't like saying the word chemtrail. I say it sometimes on air if I need to kind of like, as a descriptor to kind of bring things in, get people's attention as a radio host. But I don't even like doing it like that because I don't like the word. It's a verbal meme. It's
I get it.
such a meme.
I get it.
You hear chemtrail, and what's the next thing? Chemtard, and then, or you get into arguments with people, and then, like you said, the debate is how are they spraying, what are they spraying into the atmosphere? No one's thinking why they would do it. No one's trying to think long term of what are the effects of what they're doing, right? Everybody's focused on this little myopic argument, and that's what they want. So I think you put that very eloquently, Jim.
Well, I mean, in the end, it's verbal ninjutsu. I mean, they're doing the same thing with geoengineering. It's called geoengineering, climate engineering, climate modification, climate intervention. They'll rebrand it and rebrand it. Now, as Ken Caldera put it, to quote you, buddy, that's called framing. And when you frame an argument a certain way, you could make people think that stuff that they shouldn't think normally when they use their gut. But guess what? That's deception, and that's mind control with words. And I take offense to what Ken Caldera and his geoengineering boys are trying to do. So you can frame it however you want. People, there are hundreds of companies all over the world every day trying to steer the weather, either for hail mitigation, snowpack augmentation, cloud seeding, you name it, filling reservoirs. There's a freaking travel company that says for $100,000 we can make it cloud free on your wedding day. So if a travel company is advertising that they can give you a cloud free day on your wedding day, it's on. I mean, it's no longer even a secret. You know what I mean? And California, they've got cloud seeding on top of every single one of those mountains. And they have since 1949 when they were invented by Irving P. Crick. Guess what? His son is my friend on Facebook now because he said, quote, "You're the only guy that's ever mentioned my dad." And I've done my research is all I'm saying. And at the end of the day, the stuff coming out of these planes has been affecting the climate in massive ways for a very long time. Nobody has a clue what natural weather would even be like until we stopped. If people would have to stop the cloud seeding, they would have to stop all of the introduction of aerosols via jets, whether they're intentionally sprayed to do whatever or not. They are heating the planet currently, and they say we're going to do X, Y, and Z to get rid of it. And here's what they're going to do. And this is what I told the EPA. They're talking about using biofuels at ground level, and they're talking about spraying sulfur at high levels. This is called JP8 doped with sulfur. It's being tested at the access flights by the Aviation Climate Change Research Initiative. This is not a conspiracy. So they want to turn these heating contrails into cooling contrails. They want to turn lemons into lemonade so that instead of the aviation industry getting a carbon tax, they get a carbon offset. If you can follow. This is high-level stuff, I understand. But at the end of the day, they've got to get out from under their CO2 bubble and their contrail conundrum. And the only way to do that, they've proposed, is A, this biofuel sulfur-doped solution, and B, something called cirrus cloud seeding. And it's called bismuth triiodide, and they sprinkle it into the cirrus clouds to melt them. So all these clouds they're making, they said they're going to spray them with Pepto-Bismol to melt them. Why are they not using dry ice? Because they used to use dry ice to do this. It's called hole boring. They're not using dry ice because guess what? That's CO2. So, I mean, at the end of the day, they can't use more CO2. I mean, then they will be carbon neutral. I mean, we're trying to get to a carbon offset. We're trying to get money back from the international cabal of carbon traders instead of getting billed by the international cabal of carbon traders by using these solutions. So right now, they're heating the planet up. They're lying about the data, the extent of what the clouds are doing. It's a 90% uncertainty range. So these guys haven't got a freaking clue what they're doing on the real.
Dude, mad scientists. For real.
Yeah.
Literally.
Let's melt that ice cap.
And see what it does, Jim.
Yeah, I mean, seriously. Dude, fire to photon torpedoes.
Dude, scary. So anyway,
yeah.
Okay, we got like 10 minutes. Get into the EPA thing really quick.
So in a nutshell, last December I started following this story, and it said on some website I read, EPA seeks to regulate the flight industry for the first time in history. And then the quote was, if they find that flight pollution endangers public health, they will regulate. I was like, that's pretty cut and dry to me. I can make that argument. So I started raising a fuss and saying EPA is going to have a public comment on chemtrails. Okay, so this is public relations. This is perception management. This is me trying to get people who believe chemtrails are depopulation and mind control to get them to go, even if I believe that, here's your opportunity to say, get rid of these clouds that I believe are doing X, Y, and Z. Do you know what happened? I got trolled really hard. I was thrown out of the chemtrails group, chemtrail girls group, which I never knew I was a part of. I was flamed by so many of these popular people, and I won't name their names, but they're all very popular people. Flame me, called me shill and gatekeeper and all this stuff. So anyway, you flash forward to today. June, I found out that they were having a public hearing, potentially, if somebody registered to speak. And it was on this thing. They were now calling it the proposal to make rules on greenhouse gas emissions from planes. And they were basically saying 6 greenhouse gases coming out of a plane are threatening my life. I take offense to that. I'm not scared of CO2. That's plant food. It makes oxygen. We love that stuff. You know, so why are we, for the first time in history, going to slap the aviation industry on its backside because of CO2 and NOx and, of course, sulfuric acid and all that stuff? But why are we talking about greenhouse gases when there are ongoing lawsuits over lead that you're ignoring? And the answer is clear. Obama wants a little ticket in his back pocket when he gets to the climate conference in December. He wants to say, hey, look, guys, I got one under my belt. We're doing something about climate change. We're going to keep on acting on climate change. And that's BS, man. His agenda should not precede ongoing lawsuits over people who have been harmed by aviation, really. Yeah, like lead and things like that, and fuel dumping. There was actually a Senate hearing in the middle of Fallon, Nevada, over leukemia clusters associated with JP8 being dumped on their community. Ooh, not a conspiracy. That's a serious problem. So basically it goes like this. The old gas was gasoline. It was JP4. The new gas, JP8, is based on kerosene, coal oil, coal ash, whatever you want to call it. It's oil. So this is kerosene based, all right? And this stuff, because they said you can only dump at this height, normally the gasoline would evaporate. Well, it wasn't anymore. It was falling on the communities as highly toxic. And as a result, there was, ongoing lawsuits, against the military, and they had a, public hearing in the middle of a field. My point is this has been going on for such a long time, and nobody's really looking at what these fuel effects are actually having on the environment. And there's ongoing lawsuits and people wanting real answers. And guess what? You go Google the word chemtrail, and you're going to see 22 million people who are concerned about what they're seeing. You can argue all day long about what they're concerned about or what their motives behind it is. Nonetheless, they don't like it, and they're voicing their outrage. And I believe that if you arm them with enough information, they can understand why they really are a bad thing. And then they can do something about it. Whether Bob, evil, decided to geoengineer the planet or not, the effects are clear. We can see what it's doing. We can see what chemicals were put in there to make this effect. And what we don't know, we can demand transparency. Tell them that they have to go do the tests because they never have. Not properly, not randomly. So I went to the EPA hearing to say that. I want random testing of just real world situations. I want to see the Saudi flight that came over that left this screaming trail over my house. I want to report that flight and have somebody look at that particular flight. And it happened. And that's what everybody's been asking for. Regardless of whether you believe it's depopulation, mind control, or whatever, people want to know. Inquiring minds want to know. Well, the fact is they're stonewalling.
There's nothing wrong with that either. And there's nothing wrong, like, when I say, when we talk about, like, the spraying of the fuel and stuff, versus just straight quote unquote chemtrail spraying planes. I do believe that they do have planes fitted that they could, if they wanted to just specifically spray things in a specific area. Of course, I'm
going to tell you how that can happen.
Right, but I totally believe they could do that. But I think it would be even more of a devious plan to actually work it into the fuel itself, because then you people go, how do these pilots sleep at night? Well, you wouldn't need that many pilots to have this on their conscience if they just were flying around, and unbeknownst to them, they were actually creating part of the problem. So we got about 5 minutes left if you want to explain that, Jim.
Yeah, so there's this thing called the NATO Pipeline Committee. It's actually only like 5 dudes, so you only need 5 guys to decide to geoengineer the whole planet, and it'll happen tomorrow. They did it once. It's called the single fuel concept. Between 1988 and 1996, they switched from JP4 to JP8. This is 28 countries, and during that switch, this JP8, it has a very high aluminum content and all kinds of real weird properties that the old one didn't have, so it vastly changed our environment. So this is a moment in history where we can see that 28 countries simultaneously started burning kerosene in engines that were designed to burn gasoline. You go try that with your Mustang in your front yard, and you're going to have a tough time. My stepfather, Chief Master Sergeant, told me it was a tough time. It destroyed their filters. They had all kind of problems and maintenance. They had to change chemicals and change them. At the end of the day, it was a big experiment to make it cheaper for them to fly. And we were the test bunnies. And guess what? That oil, that kerosene oil, it contains paraffins. Paraffins are used on stage as smoke generators. And in skywriting, paraffins are wax. And when you burn them, they make smoke. So is anybody surprised they're seeing a whole bunch of smoky clouds everywhere? I don't know. But it is an option that I am investigating, and it seems to coincide with the start of the first time the word chemtrail was ever used. And the military just recently, in 2014, abandoned JP8. They're going to Jet A. Regardless, now everybody in the world, including the military, is using the same fuel, predominantly Jet A, which means it'll be cheaper, which means they'll do even more science-y things to it, like putting biofuels, genetically modified organisms, all this stuff in. These things are scary. So that's what I went to the EPA to tell them. I don't approve of using sulfur injection at high altitude from planes, which is clearly an agenda that has been stated just recently that they're going to do. That is a fact. You cannot argue with it. And the cirrus cloud seeding. I don't appreciate, Pepto-Bismoling my sky without my consent. And I don't approve of any types of geoengineering, and they need to stop. So people just need to know the facts. They need to be armed with them, and then they can make a difference. And that's what I hope to achieve at climateviewer.com and climateviewer.net, my app. And, challenge me. Send me your stuff, dude. Shameless.
Go ahead. Throw everything out there. Plug anything you want. Go.
Well, again, I'm Jim Lee from climateviewer.com. I do this at night, as often as I can without completely pissing off my wife. So it's a passion. It's a love. I do it in the night. I'm Batman on climateviewer.com trying to save the world. I'm the dorky Aaron Brockovich. I'm the white Kanye West, as they say around here.
Can we give Mrs. Jim Lee a round of applause? Let me give her. This is from Popeye and from all the listeners. Thank you to Mrs. Jim Lee, because she's one of the unsung heroes.
She's my rock, dude. If it weren't for her, I would not be able to do this. When I went up to DC, she was holding it down on my Facebook, fighting off trolls with ninja skills unlike anything ever seen in cinema. And it was amazing.
I would expect her to have Jedi skills just like you.
She's so smart and sexy. God, I'm this close to talking her into doing a radio show. And you guys are gonna love that.
You and I are gonna chat off air. So
yeah, definitely, man.
I'll pick your brain about that off air. So, Jim, we got about a minute and a half left here. Really quick, I want to say thank you very much for coming on, and I want to say thank you for going to the EPA. And this is not just from me; this is from everybody. Thank you for going to the EPA and getting geoengineering and this conversation injected into the mainstream. It was epic that you got it on C-SPAN. Look, that's a positive step.
People have to seize the day and take the opportunity. And when you got all of this focused on planes and what it does to the climate, it's at no better time. So you can see the whole story. Watch us on C-SPAN. It's at climateviewer.com/EPA. climateviewer.com/EPA, and you can see the whole thing there. It's got a rough draft of my speech, what I actually did later, a timeline of events, and links to each of the individual speakers. I was there with Mike. We're probably running out of time. You'll see it there. It's at climateviewer.com/EPA. It was epic. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that we all have to do, take every opportunity to insert what we believe to be true, and just speak up and don't be scared.
Well said.
Be fearless, man.
Well said and well done, brother. It was awesome. You'll be back on because we're going to be talking about other stuff. Don't worry. Jim will be back on multiple times, and him and I will be getting into multiple things, including different frequencies. And
I can't wait to do the EMF show, dude.
Oh, dude, it's going to be so much fun. It's gonna be epic, to say the least. Anyway, we are out of time. Jim, thank you so much. Don't go anywhere. I'll chat with you off air. Thank you so much for everything you do, man. Ladies and gentlemen, climateviewer.com, climateviewer.net for the massive, huge map that I've been referring to things tonight, and I keep talking about. Follow him. Check him out on YouTube. Check him out wherever he is. Follow him on Facebook. I promise, ladies and gentlemen, you will not be sorry. Even if you don't agree with him, he'll get your brain going in 6 different directions, which that's what's important, ladies and gentlemen. If we all thought alike, we'd be like the Stepford Wives. Anyway, Jim, it was an honor, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. As I always tell you, the solutions to our problems are inside job. Go be the change that you wish to see in the world. I love you all, and I'll catch you all again live next week. I'm out.